the section is a great evangelist. I saw their crusade the last time in Benin, and I was like, wow, what a wonder. So it's a privilege to have him online. So pleasure is mine to introduce you, Evangelist Michael Loss. You're welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
So do you want to do English language, or do we need bilingual? I guess for the recording you want to do bilingual.
Yeah, we can go bilingual.
Okay, good. If you're ready, I'll go ahead and start. So basically, I was asked to share today on the topic of the pastor and the evangelist.
Donc, d'une manière basique, on m'a demandé de parler sur le thème intitulé Le pasteur et l'évangéliste.
And so I'll be doing that today and tomorrow. My focus for today is going to be a little different. We'll shift for tomorrow.
Donc, je vais essayer de développer ce thème aujourd'hui et demain. Mais il y aura un peu de changement sur ma manière d'aller.
So today we're going to talk about the personal need of the evangelist to have a pastor in a local church.
Donc, aujourd'hui, nous allons attaquer le point où l'évangéliste a besoin d'un pasteur sur lui.
And then tomorrow, Lord willing, I'll talk about the public ministry of the evangelist.
Et demain, nous allons attaquer le point public du ministère évangéliste.
And we'll talk about how to work with pastors in that public evangelistic setting.
Et donc, nous allons aussi parler de comment travailler avec les pasteurs étant un évangéliste public.
And so essentially, we're going to be talking today about the private need of a pastor, and then tomorrow, the public working collaboration with pastors.
Donc, aujourd'hui, nous allons parler du besoin privé du pasteur, et demain, ce sera l'aspect public de l'évangéliste.
I'd like to start with a story from the life of a very well-known evangelist.
Donc, je voulais commencer par une petite histoire tirée de l'histoire d'un évangéliste que nous connaissons très bien.
You probably have heard of him, Dr. Billy Graham.
Probablement, vous avez eu à entendre parler de lui. Il s'appelle Dr. Billy Graham.
He was, of course, very well known in the last century and a very prominent evangelist on an international level.
Il était un évangéliste prominent, très connu du siècle passé.
And he died in, I think it was 2017.
Come again, please.
He died in the year 2017.
Donc, il était décédé dans l'année 2017.
He was 99 years old.
Il avait 99 ans.
And here in the United States, he was known popularly as America's pastor.
Et ici en Amérique, il est connu, bien chez eux en Amérique, il est connu comme le pasteur de l'État.
Even though he was not a pastor, he was an evangelist. But as any evangelist knows, people like to call evangelists pastors.
Donc, tant bien même qu'il n'était pas un pasteur, mais bon, on l'a nommé pasteur de l'État.
But he was, as I say, a man that was so well known. He was a personal counselor to pretty much every president of the United States within the last 50 years.
Donc, comme je viens de le dire, c'est un homme très renommé et qui fut conseiller de plusieurs présidents des États-Unis.
And so, in terms of human success, human measures of success, he he was at the top, so to speak.
Donc, selon les mesures de, comment dire, de succès de l'homme, il était au top. Donc, on peut dire que c'est un homme de succès.
And yet, despite all of that, he remained very humble his whole life.
Et malgré toute cette renommée et tout ce succès, il est resté humble toute sa vie.
And he, at the end of his life, he was no longer able to travel.
Et vers la fin de sa vie, il n'était plus capable de voyager.
But he still had a pastor, and his pastor would come to his home and visit with him.
Et tout ce moment-là, il a encore un pasteur et le pasteur va venir maintenant chez lui à la maison.
And Dr. Graham would sit and the pastor and he would open the scriptures together, and the pastor would teach him and share with him from the Bible.
Et donc, le pasteur va maintenant ouvrir la Bible et maintenant partager la parole de Dieu avec lui. Donc, autrement dit, le pasteur continue par l'enseigner.
And so it was kind of an interesting arrangement, because you could see that this one that was very prominent and very well known was willing to submit himself to the ministry of someone that was really called as a pastor.
Donc, on peut voir qu'un homme si renommé, un homme au top niveau, un homme qui est vraiment prominent, qui a même cette grâce-là de se soumettre sous un pasteur.
And I think that's a lesson for every evangelist.
Donc, je crois que c'est une grande leçon pour tout évangéliste.
There's no point in our life when we become so successful or so wise that we don't need the input of a godly pastor.
Donc, il n'y a pas de niveau que nous puissions atteindre au point qu'on n'ait pas besoin de qui que ce soit sur nous.
And so that's something to think about. And I'd like to look in the scripture together. We'll start in the book of Hebrews in chapter 13.
Donc, j'aimerais qu'on revoie les Écritures dans le livre des Hébreux, chapitre 13.
So we've got the writer of the Hebrews. He's closing this epistle, and really a sermon. In fact, he's written this expository sermon, and at the end we read in chapter 13, verse 17.
Chapter 13, verse 17.
He says, "Obey those who have the rule." I'll just read it out of the French. We have it right here. It says, "Obéissez à vos conducteurs et soyez
Voilà.
soumis."
Do I read it?
I'm sorry.
Should I read the French version?
You can if you'd like, sure.
Ok, ok. Donc, je lis en français. Nous sommes dans Hébreux chapitre 13, le verset 17.
Oui.
Il dit, obéissez à vos conducteurs et ayez pour eux de la déférence, car ils veillent sur vos âmes comme devant en rendre compte. Il en soit ainsi afin qu'ils le fassent avec joie et non en gémissant, ce qui ne serait d'aucun avantage.
Very good. So we read here that those that have been given that call, and he's speaking here of the community of the body of Christ. There's those within that community that have a call to pastor.
Donc, on peut voir ici dans la communauté chrétienne ou bien des enfants de Dieu, il y a ces gens-là qui ont reçu l'appel d'être des pasteurs, ceux qui veillent sur les âmes des autres.
And so he speaks to really every Christian to obey those who rule over you.
Donc, il est en train de parler à tous les chrétiens d'obéir maintenant à ceux-là qui veillent sur eux, ceux-là qui roulent.
And there's no point, let's say it this way, with proper governance, there is no situation where a person is so high that there's no one that they answer to. There's always someone we have to give account to.
Donc, j'aimerais insister sur ce point-là où on ne peut arriver à aucun niveau où il n'y a personne à qui tu peux rendre compte, il n'y a personne qui peut parler dans ta vie.
Even if you're a pastor of a church or maybe a bishop that oversees an organization of churches.
Même si tu es un pasteur ou bien tu es le pasteur d'une organisation d'église, tu es le boss ou bien quelque chose, tu
There's
dois toujours rendre compte à quelqu'un.
Yeah, there's always, even in those situations, there's going to be some form of accountability, maybe among colleagues, maybe among peers.
Donc, même à ce niveau-là, vous devez avoir quelqu'un à qui vous rendez des comptes, à qui vous donnez des rapports. Peut-être un collègue ou bien quelqu'un plus supérieur, plus avancé dans le ministère.
Even within the structure of my own evangelistic ministry, I have a board, which would basically be elders, people that work with me, and I lead, but they also watch for the safety and health of the organization.
Donc, même dans l'organisation que je préside, j'ai un comité à qui je rends compte et qui peut intervenir en cas de besoin, qui peut parler dans ma vie.
And so the scripture here says that those that have the rule are watching over our souls, watching over our very lives.
Donc, ceux qui sont nos conducteurs, c'est-à-dire ceux qui veillent sur nos vies.
And they're ones who must give an account on our behalf for the way that they led us.
Et aussi, il devra donner des comptes sur nos vies, la manière dont ils nous ont dirigés.
Uh, Pierre Marc, that's with us today, was with me on the team in Benin, in Jacotome, Benin.
Donc, Pierre-Marc, qui nous a rejoints, était avec moi. Faisait partie de l'équipe quand on était parti au Bénin.
And I shared along the same line in the conference for evangelists there.
Come again, please.
I shared these same ideas with the evangelists that we were training in Benin.
OK. Donc, j'ai partagé cette même idée avec les évangélistes que nous avons entraînés ou bien que nous avons, je ne sais pas, géré au Bénin.
And just sharing with some of my own experiences.
Donc, je veux partager quelques-unes de mes expériences.
I think the main reason, or one of the main benefits, let's put it this way, one of the main benefits of having a pastor is that we as evangelists, we need someone that cares more about our person, more about our soul than even about our ministry.
Donc, la raison pour laquelle, étant qu'évangéliste, nous avons besoin de quelqu'un qui veille sur nos âmes est que nous avons besoin de quelqu'un qui s'inquiète pour nous-mêmes plus que nos ministères.
You'll have many people that will see your publicity and they'll say, "Oh, good job, great sermon, great miracles."
Donc, vous allez voir des gens qui vont vous acclamer et voir vos posters et dire que, ah, vous faites de gros boulot, vous êtes une grande personne.
But you need someone that loves you enough to speak truth into your life, someone that loves you enough to ask you, how are you doing? How is it with your soul?
Mais toujours, vous avez besoin de quelqu'un qui va vous aimer et qui va demander d'après votre état pour demander comment vous allez et puis s'inquiéter de votre âme.
So these are important things to protect us in order that as evangelists we can make it to the end of our race.
Donc, c'est une chose très importante pour que nous, les évangélistes, nous puissions aller au bout de notre ministère.
If we do not have pastoral figures in our life that are watching over us, then we are exposed to danger. We are at risk.
Donc, si nous n'avons pas un pasteur qui veille sur nous, bien qui rend compte sur nos âmes, c'est-à-dire que nous sommes exposés.
I'm always very, very skeptical of evangelists that travel around the world and do public ministry, but back home they have no church, they have no pastor.
Donc, je suis vraiment sceptique sur ces évangélistes-là qui font un ministère public et qui parcourent tout le monde entier faisant leur ministère, mais n'ont pas un pasteur établi sur eux.
So it's always a warning sign for me when I hear someone say that. It's a very dangerous place for any Christian, but maybe especially for an evangelist.
Donc, quand j'entends parler de cela, ça m'effraie parce que c'est un point dangereux d'arriver à ce niveau-là où tu n'as personne sur toi, tu n'as personne qui peut parler dans ta vie.
And the same writer of Hebrews tells us this very important point, and you all know the verse in Hebrews 10, verse 25.
Mhm. Donc, dans le même livre des Hébreux que nous connaissons très bien, il y a le chapitre 10, le verset 25.
It says, "Do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together."
Donc, il nous a dit de ne pas abandonner nos assemblées.
And that we are to exhort one another even more and more as the day of Jesus Christ is approaching.
Et que nous devons nous exhorter aussi longtemps que nous voyons le jour s'approcher.
And so these are just common sense principles, that to have long-term success.
Donc, voilà un peu les principes pour avoir un long succès.
And so I could share briefly on my own experience with the pastors that God has put in my life.
Donc, je peux aussi partager de mon propre expérience les pasteurs que Dieu a mis dans ma vie.
I believe that God desires every evangelist to have a healthy relationship with the pastor.
Et je crois que Dieu désire que tout évangéliste ait une relation de qualité avec des pasteurs.
And a healthy relationship with a fixed local church where they live.
Et aussi une bonne relation avec leurs églises locales.
And we see that in the life of Philip the evangelist in Acts chapter 21.
Et aussi, nous avons vu cela dans la vie de Philippe l'évangéliste dans Actes chapitre 21.
Yeah, 21.
Actes chapitre 21, voilà.
In Acts 21, we see Philip's family life. We see that he had 4 daughters that were unmarried, that were prophetesses, that were involved with him in ministry.
Donc, dans le 21e chapitre du livre des Actes des Apôtres, on a vu on a vu la vie de famille de Philippe, on a vu qu'il avait des filles qui n'étaient pas mariées, qui étaient des prophétesses.
And so we know that he had not just a successful public ministry in chapter 8, but we also see that his family life was healthy and his daughters didn't marry. They wanted to stay with their father apparently and continue in ministry. And so there's a healthy balance there publicly and privately.
Donc, dans le 8e chapitre, on avait vu la dimension du ministère de Philippe. Et ensuite, on vient de voir maintenant sa vie privée, sa vie de famille. Et on a vu que les deux étaient équilibrés.
I want to share my own story, my own testimony. But before I do, I want to give a negative example of what we're trying to avoid.
Donc, je veux donner moi-même mon témoignage avant qu'on ne passe sur un autre point.
I'm thinking of my mentor that is with the Lord now. He passed away earlier this year.
Donc, il y a mon mentor qui est déjà décédé.
And he ministered for about 70 years in around 70 nations.
Et il a servi Dieu pendant au moins 70 ans et aussi dans 70 pays.
And as he preached and would go out, the Lord used him powerfully all over the world.
Et quand il prêche, le Seigneur l'utilise puissamment à travers le monde.
But unfortunately, his local pastor for a time, didn't really have a proper respect for him and his wife, and really kind of kept him and his ministry separate from the local church. It was very unfortunate what was happening.
Donc, malheureusement, son pasteur avait eu un petit problème avec lui. Please come again, let me interpret it very well.
Yeah, he and I apologize. I probably could have been clearer. The pastor, I think, was jealous of him.
Ok, donc je pensais plutôt que le pasteur était un peu jaloux de lui.
And so my mentor, his name was Papa Dorn.
Donc, le nom de mon père, de mon mentor était Papa Donna.
And he would go overseas and do ministry and come back to the local church.
Donc, il va voyager, aller au-delà de son pays, aller rendre ministère et revenir dans son église locale.
But when he would come back, the pastor would never have him share about what happened. He would never have him take the microphone and give a testimony for even a few minutes.
Donc, même s'il revenait, le pasteur ne va jamais lui donner l'opportunité de partager les témoignages ou bien l'expérience qu'il venait de voir, d'avoir, etc. Le pasteur ne lui donne pas des opportunités.
Now, Papa Dorn, as I say, was a really an apostolic figure. He was loved and respected by thousands of pastors all over the world, literally.
Alors qu'il était respecté par les figures apostoliques, les pasteurs partout dans le monde.
And so this local pastor was very, I believe, dishonoring to this great man of God, a very humble man of God.
Et donc, ce pasteur local, je crois qu'il était, il n'avait pas du respect pour la personne de cette personne-là que tout le monde honorait partout dans le monde.
Thankfully, Papa Dorn eventually got into a better situation with a different church. And the last years of his life, he was just honored and showered with love, as he should have been.
Donc, il était plutôt apprécié par d'autres églises et vers la fin de sa vie, il était honoré, etc.
My personal experience, I feel, was very, very healthy in the church I grew up in as a young man.
Et moi-même, mon expérience que j'ai eue, bon, c'était une très bonne expérience dans l'église dans laquelle j'ai grandi.
My pastor, literally, where I grew up, I was in his church from the time I was just a baby.
Donc, quand j'étais dans son église, j'étais juste un enfant.
I grew up with his children.
Et j'ai grandi avec ses enfants.
And so Dr. Carl, he could have had a very, you know, disrespectful or kind of dismissive attitude toward me. He could say, well, I've known Michael forever.
Donc, bon, il n'a pas ce déshonneur-là envers moi pour dire que non, je connaissais Michel pour toujours.
But he had a respectful attitude. He recognized that God had put a call on my life.
Donc, il était tellement respectueux pour reconnaître l'appel de Dieu sur ma vie.
And so it was a very healthy relationship where I received the pastoral ministry that I needed, but then also the local church and the pastor respected my call and would support me in that.
Donc, c'était une relation très bonne où je recevais de mon pasteur comme j'en avais besoin et aussi il avait reconnu mon ministère et il honorait mon ministère.
And I think that that is an ideal situation.
Et je crois que c'est une situation idéale.
But it only works when there's mutual respect from the evangelist and respect from the pastor.
Donc, nous avons besoin d'un respect de la part de l'évangéliste et du pasteur.
And so that has been my experience. I know that is not the experience of many, many evangelists.
Donc, ça a été mon expérience, mais je sais très bien que cela n'est pas le cas avec beaucoup d'évangélistes.
And so, in the time we have left, I just like to open it up. If there's any questions, I could keep talking, but maybe it would be more helpful if there's specific questions I could answer.
Okay. It's like, unfortunately, we have no student around anymore. But I think this moment is for me, especially because I am a pastor of our church, and God is raising evangelists in the church. And from what you have just shared, I see that we need to update and arrange the relationship between we and the evangelists. We don't need to envy them. We don't need to stop them. We need to allow them to flow and try to keep a very healthy relationship with them. So I am rather blessed.
Good. Well, I'm glad it was encouraging. I guess I didn't know you were a pastor.
Yeah.
That's great. And like I say, um,
Uh-huh.
that that's the ideal, but it only works when that the respect has to also be reciprocal from the
Mhm.
evangelist as well. So it really goes both ways. I think one thing my pastor said, Dr. Carl, he said one time that really blessed me, and it actually was a very powerful teaching moment.
Mhm.
Is that he said he was asked to come up in a public meeting of pastors and introduce my wife and I because they knew
Okay.
him. The other pastors knew him, but they didn't know us, and so he had to get up and tell them about us. And we had just started our evangelistic missionary ministry, and Dr. Carl said he said Michael and Christina are good missionaries because
Mhm.
first they were good Christians, which
Wow.
is a very powerful principle, really. And I, thank God that he could say that about me. But um, I pray that that could be the case with every evangelist that they behave properly within the local church in such a
Mhm.
way that the pastors and the congregation as a whole can bless them and send them out with support and blessing. um,
Okay.
so it has to be both respect on both sides,
Yeah.
respect that's reciprocal.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. Great. I have a question.
sure.
So, how can an evangelist help with his charisma, his gifts, help a local church to grow? Because as a pastor, we are concerned about the growth of the church, both
Sure.
spiritually and numerically.
Yeah. Well, I think on the pastoral side, um,
Mhm.
I think you already touched on it is to not be afraid. Many pastors, if they're insecure, they'll be
Mhm.
they'll be afraid of having another strong leader working in
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if the pastor is secure in their call as the pastor, as the leader of that local
Mhm.
flock, then they can
Mhm.
allow people that are also strong leaders to work
Yeah.
in a way that's beneficial. And so, but then again, as I say, on the evangelist side, the evangelist has to uh, work in an honorable way, um, and be submitted to the pastor as the authority in that local church. Um,
Mhm.
and basically it all goes back to working in authority. As an evangelist, if a pastor hands me the microphone and says, 5 minutes, that's what I do. God is my witness, and maybe I've slipped up by accident, but I mean, as far as I know, I honor
Mhm.
very consistently. If the pastor says, you know, I can't have you shared today, then that's okay. if the pastor if the pastor gives me his pulpit to minister the word, I'm not going to go in there and knowingly uh, teach things that are contrary to what that the pastor would teach there. I'm not there to be a provocateur. I'm not there to be a finger in the eye. So that type of respect has to go both ways. And when it's present on both sides of the relationship, that's when it works, just like in a marriage. There's got to
Uh,
be respect on both sides.
then I think evangelists, both the evangelists and the pastors, must be taught so that they will know all these rules that can help them together to have a very healthy relationship, I think.
Yes, yeah, I think so. And that's why
Like
I
some
think it's important.
evangelists, they feel too inferior when they submit to a pastor. They think that, okay, I also have a gift. I'm also called into the fivefold ministry, so I don't have to submit to any, there are these temptation and all that. So it creates a lot of problems.
Yes, it does. And it's a wrong it's a wrong view of authority. Well, on the other side of that equation, um,
Yeah.
when I'm at when I'm leading one of our festivals, one of our evangelistic movements, um,
Mm-hmm.
there Uh, the opposite would be true. That it would be appropriate for the pastors to submit to me as the leader
Mm-hmm.
in that setting. So, in the same way that I would submit to the authority in the local church, the
Yeah.
committee pastors, we had a perfect example. Pierre Marc was with us in Benin, and uh, several times, even though we had asked the pastors when we have them introduce themselves at the beginning of the service, and we asked them, because of time, please just introduce yourself, your name, church name, service time, address, where they can find you. Very short, very simple. Do not preach. And yet, pretty much every time there's a handful of pastors that get up, and maybe they get excited because it's a big crowd and a big sound system and they want to preach, and you've got people wanting to start singing, leading the people in singing or starting to preach, and pretty soon the coordinator is tapping them on the back and saying no. So it happens both ways. But really,
Okay.
submission to authority. So I think in the natural human mind, we have a tendency to think submission means weakness.
Yes.
But in the realm of the kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
submission is protection and power. You're
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
protected and empowered by submitting to authority.
Mm-hmm.
So the kingdom culture is once again completely opposed and contradictory to the world system.
Yeah. Of course.
Pierre Mark, you must have some questions.
Oh boy. I think I ask you about everything.
Yeah, we've had many conversations along this line, just even in the last week or so. So
Yeah. Let me think about it. Nothing that is coming to my mind right now.
yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but um, yeah, these issues, I mean, they'll never go away. They're things that have to constantly be dealt with because we live in a fallen world, and we live with people that are at various levels in their journey toward sanctification, their journey toward
Mhm.
Christ likeness. So I think that we watch first for ourselves. We don't look outside first. We look in the mirror first and say, where am I struggling to submit properly to the authority that God's placed in my life? Um, so those are important things, and it's always the enemy, our enemy Satan was the first rebel against authority.
Yeah.
So, um, in Jesus, the one that had all power, Godhead, he was the one
Mm-hmm.
that voluntarily submitted to the Father, submitted to his will,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
and even became a servant among people. So, I mean,
Mhm.
we see the enemy's method is to use power to exalt himself, whereas Christ was secure in his strength, secure in his power,
Mhm.
and because of that, he could serve with that power for the
Wow.
benefit of.
Wonderful.
So,
yeah. To go
Wonderful.
to just add to Pastor Seriam, is that Seriam? How you say it?
Yeah, say your
Pastor. Yeah, your question about the evangelist working in the local church.
yeah.
I guess that so often the pastor will see like the evangelist as the one that will go out like outside the church and bring people to the church into the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of normal as a pastor, you want to see your church growth, but mainly I think that the fivefold ministry were given for the equipping of the saints.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the main task of the evangelist is to equip the saint in the church. He has a teaching ministry
Mm-hmm.
also, that he has to
Okay.
equip disciples and people in the work of the
The minister.
evangelism. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's not like everything is on the shoulder. Like you have to bring people, you got to get people saved. But I'm just telling you that because sometime that's the tendency, that's the belief.
Yes, yes, yeah, it's true. It's true. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. I saw a student that just logged in. Samuel, tu es là?
yeah, I don't think he has a microphone, maybe.
Euh, ok, Samuel, vous avez quitté la ligne entre-temps. Donc, moi, j'ai profité de poser certaines questions concernant le pasteur et l'évangéliste parce que moi, je suis pasteur et il y a des fois une rivalité ou bien une mésentente entre les évangélistes et les pasteurs. Donc, j'ai cherché de comprendre comment est-ce qu'on peut gérer cette relation et maintenir une
Mm,
très bonne relation entre le pasteur et l'évangéliste, comme ce que l'évangéliste Michel Lux a partagé avec nous.
mm.
Donc, après ça,
Oh, on
donc,
entend son
après,
coupé.
après ça, j'ai aussi posé une question de savoir comment est-ce qu'un évangéliste peut aider un ministère à grandir, c'est-à-dire une église à grandir avec son charisme et son appel. Donc, voilà un peu ce qu'on a discuté quand vous avez brusquement quitté la ligne. Mais je suis content de te revoir.
Well, good. Maybe we can even pick up on some of this tomorrow, if there's through the recording, maybe people will have questions to ask.
Mhm.
We could look at those tomorrow as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. During this, how do you call it, training, I realized that the afternoon sessions are a bit perturbated. Like people don't really get time in the afternoon. Normally, we are supposed to have a route from Canada too, but she's not online. She has tried to join, but again, she has gone. And I don't know if we should put you in the morning. I don't know whether it will be possible
What
because in the
time would?
morning here,
Mhm.
let's say 9 a.m. here, that will
Mhm.
be 4 a.m. at your place because I
Yeah,
think 5 hours ahead.
right.
4 a.m. will it be convenient?
It would it would not be tomorrow. And the reason I have
Okay.
my parents are visiting, so I probably couldn't do that tomorrow morning, but I could do an early morning sometime. But when does your course end? What date
Okay.
does your course? How long do you continue the school?
Okay. The school the training is ending at April 2nd.
Okay,
So this Sunday.
you mean April 2nd?
Yes,
Okay.
this Sunday.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it this week at that hour, but
Okay.
maybe next time you do the school, we could talk about that. Because yeah, I mean, I understand we have to coordinate with people's work schedules
Yes,
and things like that.
yes, yes. Even Stan was online in the morning. Like in
Uh-huh.
the afternoon. You didn't see him.
Right. Or maybe, I don't know, another option, maybe would it be better instead of doing it at 3 p.m. uh, GMT? What if we did
Uh-huh.
it later, like maybe 8 p.m.?
8 p.m. Okay. Okay.
Maybe when it's after dark, people are back home from work or
Mm,
wherever they're at.
okay. Okay. Then I will talk with Stan and see what
Okay,
we can,
you
and
can
then
let me know.
yeah, I'll come back to you.
And then,
But I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed.